Welcome to Video Game Storyteller. In this series, we will take a look at specific moments in video games that left an impact on the player. It's not about what story is told, it's how it's told. In this episode, we will take a look at Naughty Dog's masterpiece, The Last of Us, to meet one of the most important characters the players will never meet, Ish. There is no denying that The Last of Us is an incredible cinematic game with a strong emotional core. Ellie and Joel's trek across a post-apocalyptic America shows just how much humanity has degraded in every direction, from lawlessness and cannibalism to totalitarianism and child soldiers. But just as we see how bad things can get, once in a while we are reminded of how good can still exist in this brutal world. There is no shortage of tragedy in Ellie and Joel's stories, but one of the greatest tragedies in the game is something the players can overlook. That tragedy is of Ish, whose trials changed him from a clever survivor to a protector. The players will only know of him through notes in the world and what he left behind. Ish is an amazing example of environmental storytelling, weaving a story of desperation, hope, and loss, using only the setting to tell its tale. The players first encounter Ish when they find his ship marooned on the bay. In it, we learn that Ish avoided the initial chaos of the outbreak by staying at sea, but he is now low on supplies and his ship is damaged, forcing him to go to shore. We can also see that he has a sense of humor, a defining characteristic of his that we will see more of later on. Ish's boat leads us to the sewers, and we learn that Ish took refuge here, using the many passageways to avoid others. Ish does not specify if he is hiding from clickers or other people. It looks like Ish planned to hide out in the sewers until, as he says, things get sorted out. We pick up another note from Ish in the sewers. He mentions people who were not hostile and were willing to trade for supplies. He initially doesn't mention his hiding place in fear that they were like the others, so it can be inferred that Ish has encountered bandits before. However, Ish also mentions that the group had children, which we learn later on from Kyle is the reason why he decided to trust them. Against his own instincts, he decides to go after the group and invite them to join him in the sewers so that they could laugh at his stupid jokes. It is obvious that Ish is lonely, but masking all of that underneath his humor again. That should be it, right? Ish sticks out his neck for other people and that would lead to his death. That is how this story usually goes in zombie media, and the players don't hear any more of Ish until they reach...
What's up with this?
You think there's people inside?
Maybe.
Are we really going in there?
No other choice.
It's a sound trap.
It's a sort of alarm.
Anything.
Someone used to live here. Don't look like that's the case anymore.
Who would stay in here? It's safe.
After triggering a sound alarm, Joel mentions that someone used to live here. Then it hits the players. It is Ish and the survivors. Ish found them and brought them back to the suburbs. They managed to survive and live together, at least for a time. But the players don't see anyone and the place is crawling with clickers, so that is already a hint to how their commune ended. The suburbs stand out from the rest of the game as it is the only place that even resembles a home. It had a nursery, library, and even a football court. There were house rules and creature comforts. We see many remnants of life and rebuilding happening in the sewers. And the place is huge, much too large for a single family. It is so big that the survivors had to organize their space. There are other safe havens in the game like Boston and Tommy's Dam, but these are places where people are trying to survive. In the suburbs, people were actually living their lives. This was a place where they were not just safe, but happy. We can see that Ish formed something of a dysfunctional family with the survivors. When he set up Susan's rain catchers, he gave the kids water guns. There is also Ish's dread at the mention of Kyle's meatloaf. It seems that Ish's good nature and sense of humor made him beloved in their little community, as some of the kids looked up to him, calling him a protector. However, the prevalence of the clickers in this area is a sign that their peaceful existence had a time limit. the players can enter a closed room that has the mysterious scrawl, "They didn't suffer." From a note in the room, the players can learn what happened. Kyle, one of the adults, was trapped in a room with some of the children. The infected were pounding down on the door, and their only hope was if Ish could get to them in time. The last line is the most haunting. "If it comes down to it, I'll make it quick." The player then notices there are some corpses covered with a sheet, and that the corpses are a little short. "They didn't suffer" seems like cold comfort in wake of the tragedy that happened in this room. What could have gone through the minds of the children, seeing someone that loved and protected them suddenly turn on them? Kyle was saving them from a fate worse than death, but could they have ever understood that? Later on in the level, the player finds one last message from Kyle, which is just after he meets Ish for the first time and before his family decides to accept his offer. In this note, we get a sense of the fear and desperation faced by Kyle and his family, and how they really had no choice but to accept Ish's invitation, even if they had no idea if Ish could be trusted. But if they stayed, they could be killed by looters, which is what happened to their neighbors. It must have been a relief for everyone to find a safe haven. It must have been devastating when everything they built and everyone they loved had to be left behind. Upon escaping the suburbs, there is a warning on the wall. Joel and the others regard it with some dark humor, wishing that the warning came sooner. However, given Ish's context, this message was not written with such levity. Someone in the commune survived the attack and wrote the warning on the wall. They had to abandon their sanctuary. We later find out that Ish is one of the people who escaped, as the players get one last note from him, with his famous line, "One open door." Ish's sanctuary was destroyed by the negligence of one person. We learn that Ish escaped with Susan, who was driven mad with grief at losing her own children. Some other kids managed to escape with them too. Unlike his other messages, there is no joke, humor, or fun in this one. You can hear his despair, pain, and anguish in his message. Ish is practically speechless in the wake of this tragedy. However, despite all this, Ish refuses to give up on hope, having seen that there is still a capacity for good in this world. There is one last mystery to Ish's story. He mentions that he refuses to give up hope for her. Who is this her? We know Ish was sheltering more than one family, from the fact that Ish and Susan escaped with some children, but Susan lost her own. We also know there were other adults in the suburbs, from the child's drawing depicting Ish and Danny. Was this someone Ish was romantically involved with? Or was it a young girl that Ish had grown close to? It seems like Ish was popular among the children. No doubt his humor made him well liked among them. Regardless, it was someone who left a mark on Ish. She left him with a great deal of hope, enough to force him to keep going. While Joel regards Ish and the survivors with cynicism and disdain, you can see the parallels between Ish and Joel. Both of them were survivors who were doing well enough on their own, but both of them are also lonely people. Where Ish masks his behind humor, Joel clings to pragmatism and survival to justify his actions. But both found something that they wanted to protect, something that keeps them going in spite of all the tragedy they have witnessed. While this whole stage might have just been another level for players and another place that Joel and Ellie has to pass through, this was a place that meant so much more to someone else. A home hidden from the apocalypse, destroyed by one open door. Thanks for watching. I guess it goes without saying that I am excited for The Last of Us 2. While I feel the story could have ended there, I am interested to see where they would take these characters next. For the fans of The Last of Us, are you hesitant or excited for the new sequel? Let me know. Until our paths cross again, see you, smuggler.